fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 312 of the Falcoholic Live. Somehow it's been a couple weeks since we've had a numbered episode on a Wednesday night, but we're back. The show is here. I've got Adnan Ikic with me. I've got Allen Strk with me. We are here to answer. Some people might say it's a little early to ask this question, but I think considering probably the single-digit likelihood that the New Orleans Saints will upset the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this weekend, I think we can probably safely say that the Falcons are not making the playoffs. So I think it's an opportunity to sort of answer the question that I think we talked about before the season, which was, say the Falcons do get a winning record, but they miss the playoffs. Would we still consider that a success or not? That's the topic for tonight's show. I think it's an interesting question to ask because I think there's several different ways you could look at it. So that's why I got multiple people here to talk through it with me. Of course, my co-host on Wednesday's show, Adnan Ikic here at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are you doing on this brand new year, 2025?
Yeah, good. It is a new year. Yeah, better than I was on Sunday, but also I've tried not to think of the Falcons for the past 72 hours. So, that's definitely helped.
Yeah, definitely. And also, our thoughts are certainly with everyone in New Orleans with the tragedy that happened there. So certainly hope for the best for everyone there. Terrible situation, and hopefully they can get on the path to recovery sooner rather than later, but just terrible stuff there. But also joining us tonight, Allen Strk at Allen Strk. Easy to remember, Allen. I haven't, the post games haven't been happening on schedule, and then the last weekend, I don't know, you were off, I guess, covering the game in person or something, so we couldn't do that one. So we had to get you on. I mean, we can't go more than a week without having Allen on the show in some capacity. So welcome back. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm feeling very well rested because I was up till 5 a.m. that Sunday night because it's very hard to get an Uber in Washington, D.C., as I was with Daniel Flick, Mark Ramundi, and Josh Kendall searching for Uber at 1:30 at night. Got back to the hotel around 2:30, and I had interviews at it. So, yeah. And then whenever you're on the road covering a game, you try to get that morning buffet if it's free. And yeah, I was up by 8:45. So yeah, I was only got less than 4 hours of sleep going to Monday. But I've been catching up now. Just finished watching the All 22 like literally 10 minutes ago, and I'm not sure how much tape breakdown we're going to do. But if we do talk about some players, I am very well prepared because in DC they put you in the worst position when it comes to the press box. They put you right in the back of the end zone. So it was hard for me to see plays at times. I think I kind of made myself look like a fool where I thought the D'Angelo Malone penalty was complete asinine, and then I realized, oh wait, he made that contact 12 yards away from the line of scrimmage. Okay, yeah, they got to call that. So It's just examples like that I was just like, oh dang, did not have the best night with takes.
Did they at least give you guys good food? Like what was the food selection for the game?
Mac and cheese was really good. They had brisket as well. Our guy Daniel Flick recommended that as well. They had some like peach barbecue chicken. Oh no, pineapple barbecue chicken, but I'm not a pineapple guy, so I can't really play it. But yeah, the food was pretty good. Washington's done a really good job rebranding when it comes to getting the stench of Daniel Snyder off their franchise. But yeah, any stadium that puts the media, I should say, behind the end zone instead of the 50-yard line where you can see the whole field, shame on that, man. Yeah, it was difficult to see at times.
Yeah, that was what I had heard about that stadium, so I was curious if it was true.
I won't lie, like the Falcons stadium, I'm not a huge fan of the positioning either, just because it's so far away. Mm-hmm. Like you're all the way, like it's not as bad as what you're describing. Like you can at least see the field. It's just you almost need binoculars from how far up you are in the Falcons press box. But the food is always very good, and Arthur Blank spared no expense. Always having that ice cream bar open over there, and having the desserts, and they give you something in the first half, and then they give you a different selection in the second half. So it's a pretty cool little quirk in the Falcons press box.
Yeah, it's good stuff there. Certainly like that. But I like hearing about the other stadiums too. So thanks for the reporting from DC, Allen. But guys, we're going to get into this topic, talk about the game a little bit, talk about this weekend, of course, but mostly kind of give our takes on the season and how we feel about how this has all played out, because I know A lot of fans are disappointed. I think, justifiably so. So we'll get into it. Before I forget, let me get to our sponsor, BetOnline, folks. Thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring the podcast, the show, and BetOnline, of course, continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to the in-game live betting options, BetOnline provides you with all the action, the ability to place bets on the games while they're happening, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, college football, the playoff wrapping up, or we're getting into the final games here, NBA, college basketball, March Madness going to be here in a couple months, NHL, UFC, all that stuff. You could even bet on the Falcons if you're crazy. I believe the spread is Falcons favored by 8. So, I don't know. Part of me feels like that's like too generous, and part of me feels like that's not generous enough. So I'm just not going to touch that. But that ultimately is up to you, of course. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head on over to that website. It's betonline.ag today. And don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. Well, right off the top, had a couple donations, so let me go ahead and get to those real quick. Thanks to Noah C., our moderator. Noah, appreciate you. He says, Happy New Year's, fellas. Happy New Year to you as well. He says, Raw needs to go. Was he saving those timeouts for the new year? Also, we need a petition to change the overtime rules. Yeah, well, don't get me started on the timeouts. I'm sure.
Did we get 7 for the Panthers game?
What's that?
Did we get 7 timeouts now? Did they roll over from last week?
I mean, I hope so. I don't know what we were saving it for otherwise, but we'll obviously get Allen's take on that whole situation.
If you need 3 timeouts against the Panthers defense, shame on you. I don't know if you've watched the Panthers defense, but they might be the worst defense we've seen in the last 10 years, and that's not exaggeration.
It's
well,
bad.
maybe you can redeem them for a Chick-fil-A gift card or something.
Hey.
Maybe. There you go. Unfortunately, not open on Sundays, but you can come back. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get Allen's take on the whole time management situation, of course. But yeah, I mean, the NFL has said they're not going to change the overtime rules in the regular season because they're trying to keep the game shorter. I don't think that's worth it, because how many games go to overtime anyway? Like, I mean, how many minutes is that actually going to save? So, yeah, I think it's dumb.
Did they shorten it from 15 minutes to 10 a few years ago, or am I just going crazy?
They did.
Like, they already shortened the overtime. I feel like they even made it worse, like with that rule change, because I mean, the Falcons, let's take it as an example. The Falcons had to win that game. Like, a tie would have done nothing for them, and even if Washington goes down and kicks a field goal, if the Falcons stop them, they would have had 2 minutes left, because Washington went on that, it was like a 7-8 minute drive in overtime. So I don't know. I don't like shortening it just for the sake of shortening it. Like, at the very least, leave it 15 minutes.
Yeah, you're increasing the probability for more ties. And I'm not sure if you guys watched the Broncos-Bengals game, but Sean Payton was essentially playing for a tie because he knew he could clinch a playoff spot that way. So I think you're hurting the product putting it at 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so too. So yeah, I totally agree with you on overtime should just be consistent, and both teams should be able to possess the ball. And yeah, I agree there. Got Alex Foster with the $5. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Says, I had hope for a longer season. I had hope for longer this season. So there's that. Yeah, that's true. It did last up until almost the very end. Also, Ikic might need to share whatever magic he's unlocked lately. Yeah, Ikic is definitely a bright spot. I'm sure we'll talk about him. But yeah, at least I didn't make a mock draft. I haven't made a mock draft yet. This is the longest I've gone without doing that in a really long time. So there is that.
7 years?
It's many years. Yeah, many years. So hey,
Ikic should have had that extra sack too. He was he had the sack on the Malone penalty to make it fourth down and 30. So he kind of got finessed on that play a little bit by his teammate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no, Ibikadi's been such a pleasant surprise. Love that, and obviously thanks to everyone for donating to the Senior Bowl fundraiser. This little tracker I have doesn't. For some reason, the super chats don't get counted, but don't worry, I'll go in and add them manually after the show. For whatever reason, it doesn't always pick them up automatically. But yeah, appreciate everyone for helping out with that. And we'll be knee deep in the draft takes here in a few weeks. So looking forward to that too. But yeah, before we get into like analyzing the season, I kind of wanted to get your take, Alan. Obviously, you were at the game, but that the biggest question obviously is Raheem Morris's time management. He's kind of come out as really trying to like explain his process behind it. And some people I think have kind of accepted his explanation. I know a lot of people obviously didn't accept his explanation, myself included, but I'm curious where you kind of stand on his thought process now that he's kind of been able to explain it a little bit better.
I have no issue with him explaining it as long as he admitted he was wrong, in which, it took a bit of time. He at the Sunday night post-game press conference, I should say, he said it probably should have done it. And then if I rewatched it Monday, he's like, yeah, I was wrong for it. I can understand. Look, the Commanders had some success when it came to running twists in the second half. I think both their sacks came on that. So I can understand, all right, I don't want them to reset because the offensive line was having a little bit of trouble. But besides that, I thought Penix was clean for most of the game. Like, you got to trust your offensive line. If you really believe in them, which the Falcons coaching staff does, then you shouldn't allow a team that is not that great at generating pressure to make you decide how you're going to approach the final minute drive. And another thing is just he had time to prepare. Think about it, like the Commanders punted, you have time to manage it. And Raheem Morris has been in the game for almost 30 years. He's learned from John Gruden. He's learned from in the Monty Kiffin defensive system. Then he worked with Mike Shanahan, Dan Quinn, Sean McVay. Like, he's been around too long to make such a blunder. So it's usually unfortunate. I could have bought the fact that he was accountable and that he spoke about it. Like, you could explain your decision making as long as you know you're wrong, which I believe he knows he's wrong. But it's just he's been around too long to make such a blunder like that, and especially with the quarterback who was not jittery, but Penix threw a lot of off-target throws. I did not think he played well, especially watching all 22. So to give him more comfort, they should have. Of course, you called a timeout, of course, because of the situation, but at least give him time to reset. Because you saw the play with 17 seconds, he just like lobbed up to Mooney. Just like, you just wasted down, and now you just wasted like 25 seconds. So, no, he completely botched the situation, but I don't think he should be fired for it. Let's
yeah. I was never calling for that. Some people took it to that point. I mean, I just like he did eventually get around to kind of like being like, yeah, it was the wrong decision. It took a long time. It took a lot of equivocating, and I don't love that. But
that's head coach ego.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I get it.
And we don't like it. We don't gotta like it, but that's how it is. And unfortunately,
you don't get to that position without it, obviously. So
and Raheem's been a little bit like this year, the whole stats for losers kinds of thing. So look, I still think he's very much a likable guy, but he has this frustrating tendencies when it comes to communication. And of course, now with situational management, I do think there should be serious consideration into hiring, clock management specialists, because look, even someone as great as Andy Reid need help with clock management.
Yeah, apparently they do have one, is what I was being told. I think Aaron had brought up that they do actually have one on staff. I don't know if that's like real or if they just like threw that label on somebody or what.
What was it, like a sick day for him? Was he on PTO?
That's a great point. Like, where was this man at that moment? Because if you're in that position, you make sure that timeout's being called.
Yeah. I mean, you had 6 million people back in Atlanta all screaming in unison timeout, but
Yeah. No. It's a tough spot. And to me, it's like that's like where I need you to stop being the coordinator, because like if you're the coordinator, you're looking at the matchups, you're trying to get the best play in, all this stuff. You need to stop being the coordinator and start being the head coach. Like, you have bigger fish to fry than getting the matchup you want when you have 30 seconds on the clock. Like, the number one opponent and the number one consideration in that situation is always clock, because nothing's going to limit your offense more than not having time to run the plays you want to run. And I get the idea, like, oh, I love this look, I want to keep this look, but you can't do it. It's just a luxury you can't afford. And we saw that, like, if you're wrong, like if you do it and you miss on the play, then you've cost yourself 3 plays by not taking that time out. And look, I mean, I get that you like the matchup, and Mooney was open, but that, first of all, that's a ridiculous thing to ask your rookie quarterback to do in his second start, to try to operate that. I mean, someone tweeted at me like, "Oh, well, the Falcons executed something similar to this like against the Bucks, and they were successful and they won the game, doing it." It's not similar at all. Like that play where Cousins spiked it in 10 seconds, that was a 14-yard completion. The play that this was 25 yards, almost twice as far away to run, first of all. And in that situation with Cousins is a 10-year vet, and they clearly were practicing and prepared to go do that. Penix was not prepared to do that. He looked completely surprised that they didn't call a timeout. And, like, you have 2 timeouts with Penix. You had 0 timeouts with Cousins. You had no choice. You had to spike it. They weren't even trying to spike it with Penix. So it's like, I don't really get any of that. I mean, I think, like, I appreciate him, like, talking us through it, so we know that there wasn't some, like, I just forgot to call timeout thing. It's like, no, I like this matchup. I thought we could do it. It was wrong, but, like, at least there was some reasoning behind it. But it's like, I just think we're way into the weeds when you just should be always coming back to the clock is your biggest enemy in a 1 minute or less drill, not your opponent. So
I also think that it's harder for Penix as well. Like, you just sprinted 25, 30 yards from where he was, to then immediately go into that mode of, all right, I have to make the very next play immediately, versus, all right, you take a timeout, you reset, you huddle up, and you have 40 seconds pretty much to gather your bearings and then to make the throw. Like, I know that obviously no quarterback will ever use that as an excuse, but it is different. It is different when you have to literally make a 30-yard sprint before making the next pass versus, all right, let me walk up and run the play as it would regularly be run. Because you had another timeout. You had the whole field open to you. Like, that's the thing. If that was your last timeout and, all right, you're not in field goal range, all right, maybe it's justified a bit more, but you had a second timeout to use it to pretty much get yourself into field goal range, and you would have had 32 seconds.
Yeah.
Do you think he may have gave too much respect to Dan Quinn's defense? Because look at the previous drive. They made it very difficult with the botched snap and a couple of other blunders, but they just marched down the field, and Penix was making some really impressive outside numbers throws to Drake London, and then threw a bullet to Kyle Pitts for the touchdown. It's like, there's clear confidence now with this offense after being pretty much negated in the second half because defense couldn't get off the field. So I don't get why you don't trust their offense. And 2 other notes. That week 5, they still had a healthy Younghoe Koo kicking field goals. This game, you have Riley Patterson, and Riley Patterson got cut by the Lions 2 weeks before the playoffs last year. So there's a reason why he has not really been on a team. You can't trust the kicker like that. And from watching Darnell Mooney on that play, there was no instance where he was going out of bounds there. He pretty much went inwards instead of outwards. So he was probably operating with the assumption that they were going to call a timeout. And Mooney wasn't in the locker room too long, but he did answer a few questions. And, of course, the timeout question was brought up. And he basically said, yeah, I thought we were going to call it, but it wasn't called. What am I going to do? So, yeah. Even the players knew that, okay, we got to call timeout. It's like, because Mooney would have, if the timeout, say if they only had 1 timeout left, Mooney would have tried to get out of bounds there. He's a very intelligent player, and he had enough separation to make the move there. But he literally went inwards because, like, we have 2 timeouts to work with. So the fact that the personnel knew and Raheem Morris did it, that's even more crushing. And like I mentioned before, you got to get in the best position possible when you have Riley Patterson as your kicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Patterson, like, he's never made a kick that long in his NFL career. He's never made a kick that long in his life outdoors. And, yeah, I mean, Morris said himself he was pretty much a dead man walking, more or less. He said that he called it a desperation kick. He called it a desperation play, which, I mean, first of all, 56 yards, you're really handicapping yourself. Like, if your kicker can't get it there from 56 yards out, you're really handicapping yourself as an NFL team.
Yeah. And let me tell you, it was a beautiful night. It was like 58 degrees outside. So this wasn't your typical Northeast chilly night. It was beautiful.
It was accurate. Like, the kick was accurate. On the middle.
I thought it was going to make it. I was like, oh, shit, yeah.
Like, I feel like I would feel almost better if it was like, a long enough kick that you just missed because, that just happens, versus yeah, this kick was like 10 yards short. And you're like, you sort of know that you never really gave yourself a chance with Patterson in that scenario. And then, also, yeah, you send him out there as a dead man walking, knowing you can't make this because you ran out of time, which takes us back to the original conversation. I don't know. It just feels like a really, really bad unforced error on Raheem Morris's part. And it's unfortunately an unforced error, which one was under the microscope of Sunday Night Football, and two, it more or less costs you your season if we're just being candid at this point.
Right. And like, obviously other things happened in the game. Like it wasn't just those, but it all still falls on the head coach. And I think ultimately, like, that robbed you of probably 2 to 3 plays to get that to be a makeable field goal, or at least have a realistic shot at the end zone, and I think you do your rookie quarterback no favors when you're trying to make him rush a play. Who knows? Like, if he had time to, I get that they like the personnel that they were going up against, but I feel like it would have been better to be able to just get your best play calls in and not have to rush your offense down there. It just, there are a lot of problems with it. I mean, I think it was a bad decision. And, Raheem seemed to take issue with, I'm not the only one, but certainly one of the loudest people saying that, he sounded during his press conference like he was throwing his offense and his kicker under the bus. And he's saying he wasn't trying to do that. I certainly believe that he was not trying to do that, but also you have to understand the words you say, right? Like, I thought we were going to get a faster operation down there. Like, like that means that you're saying your offense didn't execute. So you are blaming your offense. Like, it's a desperation kick.
Like, when you say we should be smoother, it's like, okay, you're putting it on the personnel.
Yeah,
now.
it's like, it's a desperation kick. So you're saying your kicker is garbage. Like, I get that you're not trying to do that, like, consciously, but, like, you have to take into account what you're saying and what your players and people that hear those words are going to think. And they're going to think you're throwing them under the bus because that's what it sounds like. I'll if he says he wasn't trying to do that, okay, I'll give you that. But, like, you can't be surprised when people come away from hearing those comments and having that take on it. I mean, that's just kind of what it sounds like. So, but, it's unfortunate the way it went down, obviously. But other than that, we did, I think, Penix's, like, performance, I think that's, like, one of the more interesting things because, like you said, like, just the deep ball chemistry is just not there. Like, it just pains me because it's like Penix should have been starting against the Raiders. I think we all know that. Like, the fact that Kirk Cousins went out against the Raiders and won, and then they benched him means he was a dead man walking. And, like, it's just bad coaching, like, you need to get, like, if Cousins is not as that close to being benched, like, you just need to put the rookie in because getting him used to prime time, getting him another game against an easier opponent. I mean, who knows what could have happened, but, the deep ball chemistry is obviously off, but you like what you see in other ways. And, like, he was, like, robbed of a legacy building game here. Like, he didn't just put together one game winning drive. He put together two, and, was just let down, by some mistakes. So what did you think about Penix on the whole?
I like the fact that his chemistry with London's growing. Like, that game-tying drive 3 times hit London on, I think all of them were 14 yards or more, especially the 31-yarder. And they're pretty much either out of the slot or on the outside where just outbreaking routes. And seeing Penix hit those outside throws were big because I thought a lot of throws where he was trying to attempt outside numbers were completely off target. And I'm not sure, Kevin, about your evaluation when you were scouting him going to the draft, but Derek Klassen, the Athletic, was bringing this up, how Penix seems to be lacking touch on his throws, and maybe that's the reason why the outside numbers throws were just inaccurate on a lot of occasions. Like, his trajectory is kind of low where he kind of needs to put more arc on it. Did you notice that? Because I've seen so many throws, whether it was to Mooney or Hodge or even London, it just seemed like any out route until that final drive tie the game. The drive before the final drive of the game, I should say, for the Falcons. It just seemed like a lot of those throws were inaccurate. And that was the thing that was most frustrating, was just the fact that some of these balls were not even catchable. And it's just like, you don't want to put your offense at complete disservice like that, because he still made some big time throws, but it's just the down and out consistency was not there at all. And I know we got to keep him to a standard because it was his second game, but is that a concern given that a lot of his throws were kind of like line drives?
I mean, to me, it's like it all looked like he missed the same way consistently. Like he would just put it out in front of his guy a little bit too much. And to me, that's like, that to me is a sign of I am not totally confident in knowing like my receiver super well. So I'm not going to put this ball in harm's way. I'm going to put this out where my receiver can get it. And I'm just going to have to do my best, like, to try to get this there. It looked like training camp throws, right? Like where you're not going to, he's like, this ball's not getting picked off, but like, I don't know you very well, receiver. So I'm just going to have to put this out and hope you can get to it. And, it was usually like one or two steps off. And to me, that's like a chemistry thing, but we'll have to see how it develops. Obviously another week here, maybe against the Panthers, if he can hit some of those throws that he was missing, we'll feel a lot better. But yeah, I mean, he's a power thrower. You could see it. I do think, on the short throws, he can throw with touch, and I think we've seen that. So to me, it's like I feel like it's more of a chemistry thing. But we'll see how it develops, especially against the Panthers now that he's had another week with these guys.
Adnan, you watched Penix a lot in training camp, just watching him against Washington. Were there any like tendencies or things you noticed that you saw in training camp, or things like relatively new with him?
I mean, it's a bit different with camp, right? Like he was pretty accurate in camp, but also you don't have the defense coming at you. But I completely agree with you about the touch in the game where, yeah, that was one of the big like concerns coming out of college. And yeah, I think we saw it over and over again. Like it was, and I think to Kevin's point, maybe that first interception rattled him a little bit as well, where, you had it on the very first drive. And then after that, who knows how he would have performed, if that interception doesn't happen. I think it wasn't his fault. I think it was Chris Blair's fault. I mean, he obviously didn't see another snap after that, but still, throwing an interception as a young quarterback, that'll still sort of get to you a little bit. I read a report today that Penix himself said that up until 2 weeks ago, he never really threw it to Drake London or Darnell Mooney all year in practice, because obviously Kirk Cousins was always running with the ones. They didn't play Penix in the preseason at all, other than that one game where he had a drive or two.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I can't stand that, especially your young quarterback who, you want to get the live game reps. But yeah, I mean, in camp, he did a good job, just like in this game, good job of not really putting the ball in harm's way. He didn't really get intercepted much. And I think he was sort of leaning back on some of those tendencies to, sort of not take that risk. But you're now in a game where you sort of have to take some of those risks if you want to beat a very good Commanders team.
Agreed. What I was going to mention, that interception, it turns out Mooney was injured on the play, so that's why Blair was in. And if you watch all the way two of it, the spacing is terrible. It looks like a Dirk Cutter play design. Like it just looked completely clustered. And then Blair, I don't know, he kind of collided with the defenders. So the play was a disaster from the start. Usually the Falcons are good at using that short motion to spring something free. But I think that's just more unfortunate that Mooney was out, and then just the spacing was abysmal. But
yeah, I think somebody ran the wrong route more than likely, but I'm not sure who it was.
Because another issue was that, and he was asked about it, he didn't really explain, but Raymond McLeod, essentially got benched the first two drives. Like he didn't play. So, and there was no explanation for it. And I know Hodge and McLeod's worked with Penix the most over the course of the season. So the fact that in a must-win game, your primary slot receiver, your third down machine, Raymond McLeod, for a reason is not playing. Look, I know we all love Kadero Hodge, and he's a valuable contributor, but in those high leverage moments where it's about third 11, you need your reliable receivers out there. So the fact that you had to put Chris Blair in, it's those moments, like the margin for error in these types of games are minimal, especially given how much Washington dominated that second half. So it would be costly.
It definitely felt like the coaching staff has done Penix a disservice, like just in general, from like a macro sense. I feel like they've made his life a lot harder than it needed to be when it came down to now the crescendo, like the big moment. I don't think the Penix had a great game, like in a vacuum, but also you sort of have to grade him on a curve. This is only his second start. He's barely had practice reps with the ones. Like I said, he didn't even get training camp reps, which I'm still completely baffled by that. Like I'm utterly baffled by not even playing him in the preseason. So I don't know. Like I'm not gonna sit here, saying that Penix, is the next franchise quarterback based on this performance. But at the same time, I can't sit here and criticize him and be like, oh, well, yeah, Michael Penix had a rough game and that's why the Falcons lost. Like, if you take everything into context, I feel like it was really unfair, the position that they've sort of put Penix in, and it could have been handled a lot better by the coaching staff leading up to it.
And we have to acknowledge the highs were high. Like there were some serious moments in this game. Like, whoa, okay. And it wasn't just a Pitts touchdown either. Like there were some really nice throws to Drake London. I think it was one to Mooney. So it's not all dour here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely not. And that touchdown pass to Pitts was a ballsy play, 4th and goal. Like quick slinged it. It was one of those laser beam passes, which that's sort of a peak throw. That's a hell of a throw. The other thing though, and Jordan mentioned it on the post-game show, is I don't know. It seems like he may not sort of trust his legs fully, because I do think there were a couple moments there where he could have gotten out of the pocket and ran with it, but he chose not to. And I know he wasn't like a huge scrambler in Washington, but I don't know if it is sort of some concerns with previous injuries and having to clear some of those mental hurdles. Now you're at the NFL level. Now everyone is 2 steps faster than in college, but that is something where I do think it would be nice to see him utilize some of that pocket escapability in the future, and starting with the Carolina game. That would be nice to see in a few of those moments where you do have the space to move a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good game for him. Like really what you wanted to see was that like the moment wasn't too big for him, that he was capable of like dueling. Look, he had to go up against the best rookie quarterback in the NFL this year, Jaden Daniels, and he held his own. Like, I mean, I think he did enough to win the game. It was not like super clean necessarily, but you saw the high level throws when you had to have it. He delivered, right? Delivered 2 4th down conversions and a touchdown. That's one of the. I mean, that touchdown I think is impressive on its face, but like he looked off the linebacker to create that space. He rifled it in. Obviously, Pitts comes down with a great catch. That's nice to see, but like that's a really high level throw that like we didn't even see Kirk do a lot of stuff with his eyes like that this year. So like that. And then on the next drive, like again, he has to overcome the clock, the adversity, the mistakes. He gets them in range, I think, for an NFL field goal attempt, right?
Yeah.
56 yards. Should have had 2 more plays, I think, to get another 10 yards. I think Patterson makes a 46-yard field goal there, right?
And the other thing, speaking of adversity, he overcame the 2nd and goal from the 26.
Yeah.
In a must-have play. Like, you had the play before Drew Dahlman, terrible snap with Bijan in the Wildcat. It was 2nd and goal from the 20. How many of us thought, the game's over after that play? Yeah, it's like that's big time. That's big time to overcome that, because the very next pass was, it was a hell of a laser beam to Drake London to just even get yourself into position to be able to get that ball to Kyle Pitts in the end zone. So, yeah, he didn't mope, he didn't sulk. It wasn't why wasn't I in the pocket for that play? Why did my teammates, make this so much harder? He just went out there and he made the big time throws that were needed.
Yeah.
Based on all indications, he is very high character. Like, he has the whole locker room's trust. Like, even though there was some adversity in this game, everyone's speaking glowingly about him. So the leadership qualities are there.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's part of why it's so painful. It's like I just, I think it was obvious to most of us, after that Chargers game, that like, oh, we're in like the danger zone about Kirk now, like big time. And then, the Vikings game happens and it's like he's not startable. And then I just feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities this year. That's kind of the story of the season. And it's kind of where we are now with like, the big question of the hour, right? Like, is this season a success or not? Because, yeah.
I wonder if they didn't play such a great 3 quarters against the Vikings, if Cousins would have got benched after that. Like, let's not forget, Cousins actually hit a couple of nice throws to Mooney in that game. Like, he was managing the game well, and Flores didn't completely take it over with his terrorizing defense. So maybe that's what convinced them. But overall, I think the writing was on the wall after the Chargers game. It's unfortunate the Vikings game had to come right after that, because you do not start a rookie quarterback against Brian Flores' defense. So for the opening start, I should say, of his NFL career. But I want to mention, because we're talking about Penix a lot, but besides Raheem Morris's decision, I think we have to highlight, to me, the biggest reason why they lost: the tackling in the second half. I don't know. Insert any defensive coordinator that you don't like from the past 10, 15 years. That's what it reminded me of. Where you want to bring up like the last bit of Mike Nolan or Brian Van Gore, like that. I haven't seen tackling that bad in a long time. And wow, AJ Terrell had a fantastic game and covered his Terry McLaurin, but that tackle attempt on Chris Rodriguez on the touchdown, I think that's one of the most appalling attempts out of a tackle we've seen in a long time. That's just unacceptable for a premier corner in that position. And I hate to be so critical of him, because I think he's having a really good season, but it's those moments. Look, it's a winner go home pretty much type of game. You can't make those mistakes there.
We had that 4th and goal tackle where it was D. Alford who came in, and I forget, I think Caden Ellis had the running back stopped short, and then D. Alford came in and tried to like shoulder it instead of wrapping up.
It was Jesse Bates, but yeah, exactly what you're talking
about. For some reason,
Jesse Bates had him by the leg or whatever. Yeah.
And then Alford comes in, and he did not get to the line of scrimmage. If Alford comes in and plays that better, that's a huge turnover. Like, momentum swings right back into control of the Falcons. Instead, Washington went downfield. I think they scored a touchdown on that drive. But
yes,
I mean, that tackling, it resulted in 2 massive drives for Washington, the tackling and the D'Angelo Malone penalty. And I do want to address, I'm seeing a lot of people criticizing Zach Robinson for abandoning the run in the second half. I feel like that's very out of context, because the Falcons had 3 plays run in the third quarter because Washington just, could not leave the field. Like, Washington had the ball for a 7-minute drive, then another 7-minute drive. The Falcons on that first play of the third quarter had a negative run. You're not going to run it on 2nd and 11. And then 3rd and 11, is another passing down, clearly. So, yes, Bijan Robinson had way more carries in the first half. He had way more touches. But there just was not an opportunity to really run the ball much more than they did in that second half. On the next drive, too, when the Falcons got the ball back, I think the first run went for like 2 yards again. So, I don't. It's easy to box score watch and to be like, oh, well, Bijan had this many carries in the second half. Zach Robinson's terrible. Look at the context of the game. If the Falcons defense got off the field, then I promise you the Falcons would have run the ball more.
Yeah. No, I think that's important context. Like, I think in the moment it's like, wow, like, why aren't we running the ball? But pretty quickly, the Falcons defense took their run game out of the equation with their inability to get off the field and the mistakes and all that. And yeah, I mean, I echo what this about D. Alford. Like, last year, D. Alford was like a legit good slot corner. I don't know if it's the switch to all the zone. He's not tackling. He's like the biggest liability in the secondary by far. He's not covering well either. It's like it seems like he's all like really struggling to play the right leverage when he's lined up on the inside. And at this point, like slot corner is probably the biggest need position on the whole defense. I mean, safety, the other safety spot too, but
I don't know, man. You won't take linebacker at this point? I don't know how much you could trust Troy Anderson.
I mean, yeah, you could make an argument for any of those guys. So
because this game kind of showed like Jake Daniels had 16 carries for like $125. To me, this is the game. Like JD Bertrand, he had some promising moments, but it's like this is the type of game where you wish you had a rangy linebacker. Because even though Nate Landman had some moments, and look, Kate Ellis is going to be destructive, but not having a sideline to side linebacker in this type of matchup, it was sorely missing. But I do agree, the Alford, he just seems slow to everything, and you kind of recognize that Cliff Kingsbury targeted him, whether it was with Jameson Crowder or Zach Ertz. Two guys I feel like have been in the league for like 15 years, had their way with him.
And Zacchaeus too. Zacchaeus was destroying him when he lined up in the slot. Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus' revenge game. Nobody was talking about that. Yeah. But it's unfortunate, but they're gonna have to get a big upgrade there. The thing about linebacker is like linebacker is one of those spots where you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for one in free agency. So probably they're going to end up having to sign a linebacker because it's not going to be as expensive as trying to find like a great slot corner or, I don't know. Maybe they can find a veteran safety, but they don't have a ton of money and they don't have a ton of picks. So they're going to have to find some way to play around with that. But probably can't afford the edge rushers. And I know, we still need an edge rusher. I know pass rush has been better, but they still need another edge rusher. I mean, there's no question about that. I think the edge rusher opposite Ebiketie is still a massive need too. So, but yeah, this defense obviously needs a lot of work still. I think ultimately, I think the defense has not been the reason they've lost most of their games. I think the defense has been okay, good enough. It's just like we've just gotten like the offense going to sleep, and that part felt very reminiscent of the Arthur Smith years, right, where they would actually get some decent games from the defense, and then the offense would just inexplicably go to sleep. And obviously, the second Saints game, all the missed kicks, that's a coup problem, but also an offense problem. Like you get into the end zone. Right, like for just get into the end zone. Obviously against the Chargers, you can't have your quarterback throwing 4 interceptions. Yeah. I mean, so
I do wonder about the offensive line, though. I know they're a pretty stabilized unit, but pass protection, there's still some breakdowns. Like, even though they held up really well, like on regular rushes, but the idea of them like having to stop those twists, like McGarry was a step late at times, Matthew was a step late. I still think Bergeron at times is a little wonky there. So the pass protection, they're just those critical moments, especially on third down, when everyone likes to look at third downs. And look, the Falcons were 2 of 10 on third down. And there were just moments in that second half where Giants were completely derailed because Matthews and Bergeron were on the same wavelength, or McGarry was a step slow. So I'm curious what the tackle positions will be like, because I think the tier is going to stay the same as it should be. I do think Bergeron's made some strides this year, but especially given Penix, he's a lefty. Like, do they still want to keep McGarry? Because
my fear, in a vacuum, the answer is you probably need a better right tackle in pass protection, because the Falcons and Dolphins right now are the teams that need a right tackle more than anyone else, an elite right tackle. My fear is that the Falcons just don't have the resources.
Yeah.
Because they're already down a third and a fifth this year. Like Kevin mentioned, you do have some maneuvering around you have to do with the salary cap to get yourself into a decent position. And then you have so many holes, just on the defense, that is there going to be enough to where you can invest to plug the hole that is, right tackle, even though, McGarry's had a good season, this year overall.
Yeah.
And I do think that they'll just sort of run it back with the offensive line, because I don't know, it almost feels like it would be a luxury that they can't afford to try to upgrade at right tackle at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if they were in a better place, this would be a great year to take a right tackle. right? Or like a left tackle even. But like, any good tackle really. But, I think they just don't have an option to do that right now. And, ultimately, like, I do think this is still a top 10 offensive line. Like, it's just like they got some things they got to clean up. But like, look, I mean, they've had some great games against tough competition, and then they've had some middling games. But that's kind of just what happens in the NFL. You're rarely going to get just completely clean games, even from the best O lines. This group isn't in the stratosphere of like the Eagles and the Lions, and they probably can't afford to get there yet. But maybe I think it's like I would definitely consider taking like a developmental tackle or something, that you can try to develop for the future. But yeah, at this point, they're probably you can cause just as many problems as you can fix by trying to blow up this offensive line or cut McGarry or whatever it is you're trying to do. You don't really have the luxury, I think, to go down that road. It's just a little too risky, and the offensive line has been good enough. I really don't think the offensive line is problematic.
That's what I'm nitpicking at this point. I think I'm just being too critical because
I get it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the Commanders game and like I'm just thinking of like what went wrong and like that second half is just the drives that they're kind of derailed. But like we're looking at 2 drives that have 8 or 9. Like you watch that game, Penix had a lot of time to throw on most occasions. So yeah, I'm probably nitpicking there. Okay. It's just. I guess the whole offseason has to be dedicated to defense then.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world.
But I mean, I do think that long term they will want a right tackle, who is an upgrade in pass protection. Just because right tackle is your left tackle at this point. Like right tackle is your second most important position on this offense. Right after right after quarterback. For as long as Michael Penix is the quarterback, you need an elite pass protector for him at right tackle. It's just, I don't think we can afford that right now. And yeah, I think McGarry's good enough to where you can sort of roll with him for next season. And then hopefully you can, address some of your defensive needs this year and then restock in a couple of seasons when you do have all your picks and when you are in a better spot salary cap wise. Because the one silver lining with Kirk Cousins falling off a cliff this year and not next year is you can move him before that $10 million guarantee hits for 2026, which is on the 5th league day this year. And, you don't have to be married to Kirk Cousins at all past next season.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're going to have to find a way to maneuver around that. I'm not exactly sure what they'll do, but I do think like a tackle is definitely something that's on the needs list. Because again, you've got 2 guys, that you're not sure about super long term. Obviously Matthews, we don't know how much longer he's going to be able to play. I mean, I'm not worried like the next 2 years or anything, but beyond that, who knows? And with McGarry, it's like, he did grow this year and he grew last year. So if he can continue growing, maybe McGarry is the guy you end up keeping long term. And you just get another tackle somewhere. But, I don't know. But I think they would be very wise to start planning as much as they can for that. Get some developmental tackles in here, see if you could find a diamond in the rough. I mean, that's what the Eagles did, right? Jordan Mailata. You take shots, look for guys down the board and see if you can get lucky on one. And that would solve a lot of problems for you if you can get lucky there.
Man, having Penny Sewell right now would be really nice.
Well,
I mean, the Falcons got history with late round right tackles. If you look at Tyson Clayball, Ryan Schrader.
Yep.
Tyson Clayball, I believe, was a 7th rounder. Ryan Schrader undrafted. So
I'm Valdosta State. You're a local kid, Ryan Schrader. He gave you a lot of good years.
Yeah. So maybe we can get lucky again there. But yeah, ultimately, like, I'm curious what you think, Alan. Obviously, the Falcons very likely to miss the playoffs, but also very likely to. No matter what, they'll have more wins than they've had in the last 7 years, right? They've already achieved that. They could have the first winning record also in 7 years. But what do you think? Do you consider this year a success or not overall? With the knowledge that, obviously if they somehow luck into the playoffs, then probably all still consider it a success. Depending on how the playoff game goes, but assuming they don't make the playoffs, I guess where do you kind of stand on that?
I can't say it's a success because the litmus test they've failed several times. You look at Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Chargers, Vikings, Broncos, now the Commanders. Games against playoff teams. They've got blown out twice, which look is what is with that. But falling short, whether it's Pittsburgh, where it didn't seem like the offense was ready to play. Chiefs game, okay, the refs, we know that. But I thought in the trenches, they were soundly handled on both sides. Chargers game, quarterback implodes. And then this game, just the defense couldn't go off the field. So I think to be successful, you have to at least beat some playoff teams. And, you swept Tampa, you beat a Philly team without A.J. Brown. It's just not enough for me. I do think they made legitimate progress. It's really refreshing to watch a pretty fun, prolific offense, albeit could be wildly inconsistent, but we've seen some really high-level offensive play that we haven't seen since, 2018, 2019, because even though Matt Ryan was pretty good in 2021, the offense personnel-wise was really limited. So at least seeing like a pretty dynamic offense was refreshing to watch. But, I can't really say it was success. Like, not too many young players really stepped up in the defense either. So, it's just not enough for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair take on it. I think a lot of fans would agree with you there. You in the same boat there, Adnan? Do you think this year was a success or not?
I'm in this exact same boat. I think this year, I think we can. I mean, obviously, they get into the playoffs, then we're having a different conversation. But I consider it a failure, just because they came in and Raheem Morris said himself that the goal was to outrun the NFC South. I think we all came into this season with the expectation that this has to be the year where things get put together. This is year 4 under Fontenot. Raheem Morris is, a new head coach, but the big plus with Raheem Morris is that he's not a first-time head coach, and he's not even a first-time head coach in the building. He even, coached this very team in this building a few years ago, albeit as an interim. They made the full investment in free agency. They had the win now move for the pass rusher, even though Matthew Judon did not, play up to our expectations. You still used up a second round or a day 2 pick for his services for an expiring contract, a win now player. And you pretty much came out, and right now you have one more win than you did last year with Desmond Ridder as your quarterback. It's not enough. It's not enough at all. And I feel like if I went back in time and asked each of us in August if we would consider this season a success, if the team won 9 games and if they missed the playoffs completely, I think all of our answers would have been no. That we had to see, at the very least, a run to the playoffs this year. And I mean, this is a team that they even had injury luck this year. Outside of Troy Anderson, I can't really remember, a legitimate starter who was out for a very long time this year. Obviously, you had, bumps and bruises. Every single NFL team does, but you had a lot go your way this season. Yeah. A lot went Atlanta's way. The Saquon drop, the missed call on the Kyle Pitts touchdown against Tampa, the missed call on the Bucky Irving face mask against Tampa in the second game, the Younghoe Koo 58-yard field goal. Like, there was a lot of fortune that favored the Falcons this year, and you still ended up, having a negative point difference. And, just the fact that this is the topic of the show, of this week's show before the season's even over, I think tells you everything you need to know about this season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think this is anywhere close to a success. I mean, I obviously you're a game off, right? So maybe you consider that close, but they needed to get into the playoffs this year, and this was a good opportunity to do it. They got the sweep over the Bucs. That should have been all they needed to do. They're probably going to end up 5-1 in the division when it's all said and done, and that's still not enough to win this division with a Bucs team that's going to win 10 games, right? And it's just like you have to be better than that. And I'm not going to accept it. I know you guys aren't. I know most fans won't, but thought it was worth asking the question. But I think we can give them credit for taking some steps and potentially finding a quarterback, maybe figuring some things out in the pass rush. I think, again, we see some good free agency moves. Like, I think Darnell Mooney obviously was a big hit. Some of the other ones didn't exactly work out. But I don't think we're going to see significant change in terms of the front office or the coaching staff, right? I know a lot of fans are clamoring for that. I don't think we're going to see any of it. They're going to run it back. So in that case, it's just they just have to do a better job. They have to find a way to improve this roster without as many resources, without as many draft picks. Theoretically, you've got a better quarterback situation. And, I do think Penix does give you a lot of hope that he can be the engine that lifts this offense out of the inconsistency that they've enjoyed, quote unquote, right? Not enjoyed, more like. And that could be the key, right? If you have consistent quarterback play, this team probably wins 2 or 3 more games. But will they get that? We don't know. We got a long way to go to answering that question next year. But I think it's encouraging to see that, honestly, I think you look at how the Falcons played the Commanders and you're like, wow, they got owned. But look, the Commanders do that to everyone. The Commanders, honestly, the Falcons holding them to 24 points in regulation. It's one of their lower point totals of the year, Washington. So I don't think they played them terribly. It's just, got to manage it better. Yeah.
You got to look, I know some people are still very underwhelmed by him, given how atrocious the first 11 games were, but Jimmy Lake kind of coaching his ass off. You watch that game, 4 of the 5 sacks were on simulated pressures, and the way they were designing those pressures, and which also led to interception by Caden Ellis, of how they would blitz Bertrand and then drop Ellis. It was really well done, and the Commanders had no response for it. There were several times where the Falcons got a free rusher on them, and I just think since the Chargers game, working with limited personnel, he's done a good job of getting them to 32 sacks now, and a lot of it's just coming off these simulated pressures and blitzing Kate Ellis through the B cap. So at least Jimmy Lake, he's getting a little bit more aggressive. So if you want to look at a silver lining, some things to be encouraged about, that could be one. I know, look, people probably say, why can't they just go hire Robert Saleh or something? And I get that. But Jimmy Lake, he has helped this defense a bit. And I talked to Justin Simmons after the game. He's talked about how there's just more attention to detail now. The effort's intensified, as he said, which probably will irritate people, given that, where was this the first 11 games? But the bye week did help them make those adjustments. And he talked about how the coaching staff is, their pass rush plan is a lot better now compared to what was the first 11 games. There's, like you said, a little more attention to detail.
Yeah, I'm curious. Ever since Raheem disclosed that he's taken a lot more, coaching in the defense, everyone's going to question, how much is Jimmy Lake and how much is Raheem Morris?
True. That is a very good point.
I don't know. We don't really know. So maybe it is Jimmy Lake. Maybe it's Raheem Morris. Maybe that's why he's, not calling timeouts, because he's spending so much time organizing the defense. I don't know, but
maybe that'll lead to Jimmy Lake's dismissal, because if you remember in 2016, Dan Quinn took over play call duties in December, and Richard Smith was fired after the Super Bowl. So
we'll find out.
Yeah. We'll also we're just speculating at this point. Yeah. I mean, we go at this time next week. We might be thinking about who's going to be the new defensive coordinator. But
I was going to say, I think just to that point, I feel like Raheem Morris is sort of sowing the seeds of, Jimmy Lake's dismissal with that, by even disclosing that to the media, because why else would you even say that publicly?
Did he say publicly, or did it leak out? I'm not quite sure, because I saw Rappaport report it.
Yeah, I don't know if he actually publicly said it or if Rappaport just reported it, which
Yeah, because we've seen that in the past. Steve White reported that Raheem and Jeff Olbrook took over for Dan Quinn at one point. So
yeah,
but it is public knowledge. So
it's definitely public knowledge. But why would someone even leak it? What do you gain from that? Other than, if you want to sort of move past, I don't know what we are speculating. We'll see a few weeks from now, but I do think that's going to be the move that they make to sort of, someone needs to go down for this season. And we saw it with Dan Quinn firing the coordinators after 2018.
Yep.
That was another one. Yeah.
And I feel like that we're going to see something similar. I don't think Zach Robinson is in danger at all. First time footballer, I feel like Robinson's done a pretty good job given the limitations with Cousins. And I feel like Robinson called a hell of a game on Sunday as well. It's just, we talked about it. Penix did miss some throws. Like if Penix makes half those throws, the Falcons probably score like 35 points.
Great.
So I am excited to see Zach Robinson in year 2 with a full year of Michael Penix as well. And I do think that Jimmy Lake is going to be the odd man out.
Yeah. I do have one name that comes to mind, and I know look, I don't know how we could judge him as interim coach because that franchise is absolutely atrocious right now, total abomination to the sport that we love. But Raheem Morris does have a close relationship with Jeff Ulbrich, and I think Jeff Ulbrich did some good things as a D coordinator with the Jets. So, look, we know he's not going to be back there. He's going to be a free man. So maybe Raheem reunites with Jeff Ulbrich.
Yeah, I have no qualms about bringing Jeff Ulbrich back. I think we all liked Ulbrich. I think he was kind of unfairly criticized for, his role and the team's issues at various points. But I think, the fact that he got promoted to interim head coach over there in New York, tells you that there is a lot of respect for this guy, and he was a key lieutenant. And Robert Saleh is going to be very, sought after as a DC, so I'm not sure he'll take that kind of job here. But yeah,
I would imagine he ends up with the Niners.
Yeah, that would be my thought too. I think that's just going to be a better situation for him. So, but yeah, Ulbrich, I could definitely see that would definitely fit this team's MO at this point, bringing back Jeff Ulbrich. So, but yeah,
bring back a lot of guys.
Yeah,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they do any firings, but I agree that if they do one, it's probably Lake. Like if they, I mean, other than just shuffling assistants, that's probably going to happen no matter what. But yeah, I do wonder if they do make one, it's probably Lake. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be upset to get Ulbrich back. I think he's, a guy you'd be happy to have. But yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Oh wait, I got a couple questions here. Excuse me. We got Keith Simmons with the $2. Thank you for that. Says, do you think we pass on edge in the draft for a linebacker? I think that's what you're asking. It's possible. I mean, it just depends. Like real quick, just to break it down. The Falcons are picking 17th. The lowest, like the furthest down they could pick is 18th. So this next game doesn't matter, really. Like they could win it. It doesn't mess with their draft pick. This isn't like previous years where it's like you win and you drop 6 spots or something. If they win, they probably pick 17th or 18th. It's
not like the Jets this past week or the Giants this past week.
Yeah. They dropped like from 1 to 4, terrible. But the Falcons actually, and I know a lot of people still haven't kind of figured this out, the Falcons actually have played a tough schedule in terms of like strength of schedule, which actually hurts you in the draft pick order. I know going into the season, it looked like it was the easiest schedule. It wasn't the easiest schedule. I think people need to kind of readjust their thoughts on that. It ended up actually being a pretty hard schedule.
Playing the Chiefs and Vikings will do it to you.
Yep. So they're at a 5-1-8, which is one of the higher numbers in the league. It's, maybe like, I don't know, 23rd-ish. But I'm not exactly sure that, in terms of like strength. I'm not sure. I'd have to do that. I have to crunch the numbers, but so that's on the higher end. So as a result, they get sorted in behind people with lower strength of schedule. But I think, like, realistically speaking, if they were to lose to the Panthers, the highest I think they could reasonably pick would be like 14th. So if like they lost and Miami, won, and Cincinnati won, and Arizona won, then they could theoretically pick 14th. But that's probably the highest they could realistically pick.
Dallas too, like Dallas is in play because they also have a 5-1-8. But then
that's right. Yeah.
Then you're in the weeds of just straight strength of schedule of you're looking at you would need the Vikings to lose to the Lions.
Right, or something.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Also, Dallas. I mean, well, never mind. I was going to say they play Philly, but Philly's resting their players, so it is highly feasible.
Commanders.
They're playing the Commanders, yeah, and Commanders are playing for seeding, so Dallas probably not. Dallas probably not winning. But yeah, so we'll just say 14. It's theoretically possible. I agree that they could get 13th, but but yeah. So ultimately, I think they're probably going to pick right where they're picking right now, 17. But we'll see. And in that case, like they certainly could pass on edge, because by the time you get to 17, you might be reaching on edge. So I don't think they should do that. Now this is a deep edge class, so I mean, you know, maybe Nick Scourton could be there, maybe like Shamar Stewart could be there or whatever. You know, so maybe, right, there could be an edge there that's worth it. But yeah, I don't know if there'll be a linebacker. I mean, Mikael Williams from Georgia, he plays a little off ball. He's kind of more of like a Caden Ellis type. So I don't know if they're going to try to double dip at that spot. I think Mikael Williams is probably a better edge rusher ultimately. But, you know, I think you look at, and I've said this before, like, I think you look at hoping that like Malachi Starks falls. And we all know safeties tend to fall. Malachi Starks is an elite safety prospect. You pair him with Jesse Bates, you have probably the best safety tandem in the NFL. Safety is a huge need for this team opposite Jesse Bates. So, you know, I would be happy with that. Or Jahdae Barron as a slot corner. They really need that too. So I really think they have a lot of options there. I think you just kind of, given that the pass rush has improved some and that you know, you're further down the draft board, probably can't exactly, you know, bank on an edge rusher that you want being there. I also think a trade down is very likely, so that again could matter. But you know, the type, like if one of those top edge rushers falls or Malachi Starks falls, that's gonna, you know, really make it hard to trade down, obviously. But I think a trade down into like the 20s, like probably the mid 20s, is probably what they want, so they could recoup like a third or a second perhaps. But yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. We got Big Low Country. What's up, Big Low, man? How you doing? He says, what in the world, Bo? Was Brian Van Gorder coaching on Sunday night? I don't know, man. I don't know what happens.
Brian
no
Van
answers.
Gorder shout out, though.
Yeah, BVG. Yeah, it's a deep cut. Yeah.
It is a deep cut back. I think he was 2008, 2009, early Matt Ryan days. And then Mike Nolan comes over. You know, we're just rehashing defensive coordinators of Falcons past right now.
Yep. Yeah. So dark times indeed. And we're bringing back BVG. But, and then Ray Moon with the 2S. Would we have gotten Michael Penix if we didn't sign Kirk? Well, that's the big question, right? I mean, it definitely, I think, would have not been as clean to get Penix, right? Because everyone would know the Falcons were completely in on quarterback. So I think the answer is we don't know. I think they still very well could have gotten Penix at 8. It's just, it would have been a lot sweatier. Like, it would have been much sweatier, and not guaranteed at all. So I think that is an interesting question.
I think they would have, just because you look at what the teams that right ahead of the Falcons did, and it didn't seem like they were really taking calls to trade down. And it seemed like they all sort of got their guys. Like, the Giants got Neighbors, the Chargers got Alt. I know Harbaugh was in love with the offensive line prospect. The Cardinals weren't going to trade down. They had Marvin Harrison on their mind. I think the Falcons would, and I mean, obviously, we weren't really, you know, excited on draft night. I feel like our reactions would have been much different on draft night if the Falcons went into the draft not having signed Kirk Cousins. And if they came away with it with Michael Penix, just because, I mean, personally, my biggest qualm was, you know, I don't like investing all the money in the quarterback and then using a top 10 pick. I think you're sort of wasting resources a little bit there. But yeah, I think the Falcons would have still ended up with Michael Penix.
Very possible. Yeah, I think it. My concern is it makes some teams antsier to try to pull, like the Raiders. Like, I think the Raiders thought, because the Falcons ostensibly weren't in the quarterback market, that they could wait. I think if they know the Falcons are in the quarterback market, they probably don't wait. But again, maybe the Raiders end up with Cousins if the Falcons don't. So, you know, I don't know. It is a fascinating conversation. But yeah, I think the Falcons definitely could have still gotten Penix, but I think it would have been a lot sweatier, I think, is sort of my take on it. But it might have still worked out, but that's just kind of, we'll never know, right? We'll never know now that the die has been cast in that regard, and we'll just have to navigate it as best we can. Appreciate everyone for hanging out. Allen, any final thoughts tonight? He's Allen Strk, at Allen Strk, folks. Anything else you want to add before we sign off on tonight's show?
No, I like that you highlight the Raiders there because I do think there were reports that the Raiders were looking to trade up. But besides that, wow, we gotta start investing in the draft. Yeah, you gotta get your mind right for that. But of course, free agency will come at some point, and we'll see some of the cap casualties. I know you've been talking about Grady Jarrett possibly. I think Onyemata is looking likely. Maybe trade rumors with Kyle Pitts. I know Adnan would enjoy that. Get those Kyle Pitts takes off. So this is gonna be. They might not be aggressive in pursuing free agents, but I do think this is a very interesting offseason ahead for the Falcons. A lot of
Hey man, you trade Kyle Pitts, you're opening up what, $10 million in salary cap space.
Probably get a day 2 pick too, because I don't think they pick up the phone for anything less. So, that could be an option. I guess we'll see. I kind of doubt that they will, because again, it's like you're probably wanting a second, and I don't know if anyone's gonna give you one. And he's not exactly cheap salary cap wise. So, in that case, I think it's like the Falcons aren't going to take, less than a third because they believe they can get a third for him as a comp pick. So, they're going to be asking for a premium pick. Is someone willing to give it? I guess we'll find out. But, it is an interesting question for sure.
I got a weird feeling the Rams are going to be interested because the Rams are really interested in Brock Bowers going to the draft, and obviously there's a close connection with the Rams and the Falcons now, given Raheem's there. So, and I think the Rams, if you watch them the past few weeks, they need some explosiveness in their offense, and maybe Sean McVay thinks he could get maximize that skill set.
We know they don't care about picks. Yeah.
The Cowboys are another team that always seems to be, brought up when it comes to that conversation.
Yeah,
I think we know one. Man, Jonathan Mingo, Kyle Pitts, why not? Just get the guys that they fell in love with at the draft.
I was gonna say they paid what, a fifth for Jonathan Mingo? Like
fourth, I think.
Was it a fourth? I mean, he hasn't done shit.
I mean, I like Jonathan Mingo, but I didn't like him that much.
That's such a great.
Yeah, so, I mean, after seeing him play in the NFL, I wouldn't have traded no 5th round pick for him. But
I do think there will be trade buzz with Kyle Pitts.
Yes,
I just think it seems like a foregone conclusion. His future's just not here, so that's something else to monitor.
Yeah, obviously that nice touchdown catch will help if he can have a great. I mean, I wonder if they just try to pepper him against the Panthers, just because they're gonna have 2 backup linebackers in. You just roast, you just spam Kyle Pitts.
Hey, that play on Jeremy Chin, that was one of the few times since his rookie year he actually made something happen after the catch. It was actually really impressive. I was like, wow, the Kyle Pitts actually just broke a tackle and gained extra 12 yards.
Hey, I will say, if Kyle Pitts has a big game next week, everyone in the fantasy football community is going to fall for it again next year.
Oh man.
Yep. I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson on that one.
Is this the year? Is this finally going to be the year where Kyle Pitts breaks out? Mm-hmm. Well, it's the 4th year where you're asking the question, so
Yep. I mean, eventually he has to, right?
If you want to burn another 8th round pick, go ahead. But
yep.
Never mind.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, Adnan, anything else you want to add on this topic before we sign off tonight?
Well, no, I don't.
No.
I was trying to think. I was gonna. I think we covered a lot of it, honestly, and just big prayers up for the people over in New Orleans. I know that it's a scary situation over there, and I did just want to just re-say that our thoughts and prayers are with them over there, and hopefully everyone is safe, and hopefully everything turns out okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Just terrible situation. Just not what you want to see ever. It's and just hoping for the best, obviously, for everyone over there. Yeah, guys, again, thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. Really appreciate you ringing in the new year with us here on the Falcoholic Live. Thanks to everyone for donating. Of course, we will have more shows for you this week. Got a game preview coming on Friday. Then we'll have a little bit of a hiatus. Like I said, this weekend I'm going to be out skiing because, this team is... I was going to bring my stuff. I was going to do the whole mobile show thing, but I just can't. I can't do it at this point. I'm sorry, guys, but we'll do a post-game recap next week after a little bit after that game, and then we'll get into some draft takes. Obviously, I'll try to do maybe a mock draft late next week, maybe the first one, the inaugural edition. But I'd love to do a live mock draft for the patrons soon, so we'll probably get that going prior to the Senior Bowl. Obviously, we'll have that Senior Bowl content for you as well. So thanks everyone for hanging out with us. Thanks to everyone supporting the show. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. This is a perfect opportunity. Thank you to everyone that has. Leave us your comments. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the question of the show and anything else you got going on. As always, you can support the show at the Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. If you're more of a video viewer, the YouTube channel membership is probably more up your alley. Early access to shows. You got, I think you get some, you should be getting some ad-free stuff, all that good things with the channel. We appreciate everyone for supporting us there. And yeah, we will hope that 2025 finally brings this team a playoff berth. And, maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will. But I certainly, at least we have some positivity at the quarterback position, because we certainly didn't have any at the end of last year. That was a depressing end. Certainly much more depressing than this. At least this year we were there. We were at the precipice with a realistic shot. And, I think there was a chance that this team could have played a good game against their opponent in the first round of the playoffs. I guess we don't know who that opponent would be yet. Probably the Vikings, right? But considering how this team looked for 3 quarters against the Vikings, it's possible they could have given them a game. So it's better, but, still not good enough. So we'll hope for better next year. We got a long off season ahead, lots of great content coming, and appreciate everyone for hanging out this year and sticking with us for another Falcons season. So we'll see you guys next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks.